Everyone warned me about my fiancé's sister. I should have listened. She started telling me who to invite to the wedding. She then claimed her family was paying for it, so she should have a say. That's not true, but then she took it to the next level, and I lost it. The plan is for a destination wedding in Cabo. During Thanksgiving dinner, she looked me right in the eye and implied that we were only having our wedding down there because my dad wouldn't be allowed in the USA. I was stunned. We got into a huge fight and I've been avoiding her ever since.
My fiancé and I are getting married soon. About 3 years ago, I moved to be with her in Chicago, which is about 5 hours away from where my family lives. When we started to plan the wedding, we intended to pick a spot halfway between where we live now and where my family is. However, they insisted that they were fine to travel and that it was cool if the wedding was in Chicago. I was pretty happy about their flexibility, which made other parts of the planning easier. But drama came up when we were planning the rehearsal dinner. Me and my partner like to keep things low-key, but we've invited extended family and some family friends to the wedding, which has added up to around 70 guests. We were good with that, and planned to have a smaller group of just the wedding party and our parents for the rehearsal dinner. When I mentioned this to my family, my parents' reaction came as a shock. They were not cool with it. They insisted I should invite everyone coming in from our state. This would triple or quadruple the guest list for the rehearsal dinner, which I wanted to keep short anyway. My parents keep saying that everyone is flying and booking hotels just to be at my wedding, so they should also be at the rehearsal dinner. They wouldn't let it go until I gave in. When I told my fiancé, she got mad because the rehearsal dinner was the one intimate thing we planned to have with our close friends. So now I'm stuck in the middle and nobody's happy.
When I started baking last year, my friend Cassie became my biggest fan. She just got engaged, so she asked me to provide the cakes for her wedding. She wanted 8 single-tier cakes as table decorations, which was super cool. She didn't want a crazy design, and I was all in. Totally excited. Fast forward to January, and everything changed. She was asking for 3-tier cakes with way more decoration than I can handle. When I mentioned I couldn't do the tricky decoration, I tried to meet her halfway. I said I could manage simpler 3-tier cakes or connect her with a professional baker friend who could get what she imagined done at a fair price. That's when she lost it. She claimed that I was ruining her wedding, and she got her friends to send some pretty harsh messages my way. I was heartbroken, so I backed out of the cake deal. Then she really went off on me. We didn't talk for a while, but the ordeal wasn't over yet. Out of the blue, she contacted me again asking me to make the cakes like nothing happened, but she also said that if I didn't do it, I'd be a terrible friend. Naturally, I said no, and she tore into me again. I ended up texting her fiancé Adam with some screenshots, asking him to talk to her. He apologized, and that's when he revealed the shocking truth about her. He said that she'd done this to another friend before. This was his breaking point, and he was going to call off the wedding until they sorted things out in counseling. And when Cassie and her friends found out I'd talked to Adam, they started threatening me again. What a miserable experience.
My cousin's wedding last night was a big, hot mess. My cousin's a total knockout from a rich family, so everyone was expecting this over-the-top wedding. Sure, she looked amazing and the ceremony was very sweet and heartwarming, but everything went downhill from there. During cocktail hour, I realized that her dad had been hiding a dark secret. He was footing the bill for the whole thing, but it turns out that he'd made a few bad business deals and lost his entire savings the year before. As a result, he had the wedding at a fancy venue but skimped on a lot of the details. The cocktail hour ran super short because they'd only ordered the bare minimum of appetizers. The open bar also ran dry well before the hour was up. So, 30 minutes before we even sat down, the entire crowd ended up tipsy, hungry, and bored. When dinner was served, it was a letdown too. The steak option was barely edible. For a wedding cake, there were cupcakes, not enough for every guest. Then, there was a big time gap between dinner and dancing. There was nothing else to eat in an expensive cash bar. Everyone was in limbo. As we milled around, the main topic of conversation was how ridiculously long the wait was for us to hit the dance floor. In the meantime, Grandma drank a little too much, tossed her cookies, and then passed out. When the dancing finally started, everyone got peeved by the parade of country songs. Except for the couple, no one was really into it. Thankfully, my cousin stepped in to request some crowd pleasers that got the party going again. But whenever a slow song was played, it would be country again, so the complaints just kept on coming. When I finally decided to leave and said goodbye to my cousin, she asked me a question which stopped me in my tracks. She asked if I'd had fun. I couldn't bear to tell her the truth, so I lied and told her it was great. I hope she didn't ask anyone else.
My fiancé and I are tying the knot soon. So far, planning's been alright, except a few small disagreements over things like the venue and flower girl. But now, we're stuck on my wedding dress. I've always pictured myself in a gorgeous wedding gown, and I can afford one. However, my fiancé thinks spending that much on a dress you wear once isn't right. I get his point of view, but he also has no idea how much a regular dress costs, let alone a wedding gown. Also, isn't your wedding a once-in-a-lifetime event worthy of the extra splurge? He still wasn't buying it and suggested renting a gown. He even accused me of not being careful with cash, mentioning how much I plan to spend on makeup and hair. I think that I should be the one to decide how I look on our wedding day. So, despite the disagreement, I bought the dress. I put it in my closet, but 24 hours later, when I went to check on it, I was greeted by a disturbing sight. It was gone. I searched the house before confronting my fiancé, and I couldn't believe what he told me. He admitted that he had returned it. He said that it was because it was too expensive and he asked me to rent a dress instead. I lost my temper, which was a first for me. He took a step back, saying there's no solo decisions in a marriage and that my behavior could hint at future problems. What he said next was infuriating. He told me that I was blowing all my cash so that I could rely on him to pay the bills. We've always split the bills evenly and I'd never meddled in his finances before. I told him he has no business dictating my spending. He told me to grow up and let go of the dream dress idea, then stormed off to rant to his mom. I thought she'd have an inkling of sympathy, but I was so wrong. She berated me too, worried that my spending habits could wreck her son's finances.
My wife's colleague invited us to his wedding. It was held in a large venue with multiple events happening at once. We were checked off a list and given a hand stamp upon arrival. We thought it was so that guests from different events at the same venue couldn't wedding crash. But once we hit the cocktail hour, things got a bit strange. The wedding party entered and the buffet lines opened to serve food. We noticed that the servers were looking at our hand stamps. We then found out that the guests were served based on whether they knew the bride or groom. And there was a big difference between them. The groom's side got hot meals like prime rib or ham, while the bride's side had basic sandwiches. It was clear that the groom's food was fancy catering and the bride's was homemade or store-bought. Thankfully, they shared the champagne at least. It was pretty awkward eating with people from the other line and everyone seemed taken aback. We didn't stick around long, leaving after the first dance before things potentially got rowdier. Later, my wife asked her colleague about the strange food situation. His response was shocking. His parents didn't want to foot the bill for the bride's guests because her family couldn't afford a fancy meal.
My friend is getting married, and her maid of honor planned the bachelorette bash. She did quite a good job, and even asked us about our budgets before booking anything. It's a weekend away and we hired a private chef to cook us brunch. Then, tragedy struck. The chef had to back out because their mom passed away unexpectedly. Well, I'm into cooking and sometimes I blog about it, so the group asked me to fill in as the chef. I said okay, as long as I got paid less than the previous chef. Everything seemed fine. But there was a dark twist. The maid of honor couldn't understand why I needed to get paid and thought I should just do it for free because we're friends. When I reminded her that I'd made her a cake for her baby shower and that she'd paid me for it, she accused me of causing drama. Then she started avoiding questions about the refund from the canceled chef. That's when things got even more sketchy. She claimed that she'd spent the refunded deposit on a so-called bridal gift, but refuses to tell us how much and what it's all about. People are now thinking there's a scam going on. This is where the drama peaks. The bride's sister started a separate group chat and told us what she knew about the maid of honor. It turns out that her husband has a bad gambling habit and that they are in dire financial trouble. We're beginning to suspect that the mystery bridal gift is a way to cover her bills. No one knew until now. I think that she got defensive with me so she wouldn't have to tell the truth. As I kept digging, what I found was even more shocking. I called the property we were going to rent for the bachelorette weekend. It turns out that the maid of honor canceled the entire party without telling anyone. Now I have to break the news to the bride about her maid of honor and hope it doesn't ruin the wedding.
When my fiancé and I got engaged, we wanted something very simple and frugal. We looked into it, and in our town, there was a wedding chapel where you could get married for free, but all you needed was a $200 deposit to secure the date. After the wedding, you get your cash back. Easy, right? Wrong. First, we asked to book our wedding a year away, and they said that it was actually a $400 deposit. No problem, since we'll get it back. But then, 6 months before the big day, I got the worst news of my life. My fiancée was diagnosed with a rare kind of cancer. She died just a month later. On top of grieving, I also had to plan the funeral. I made it through the funeral and was relieved to have it behind me. But then I realized I should really start going through the steps to cancel the wedding. Every vendor immediately refunded the deposit when I told them the news. Then, I contacted the chapel, hoping they'd understand. Their reply was ice cold. They told me that they only provide refunds on the day of the wedding. That means if you don't go through with the ceremony, you lose your cash. Even after explaining the situation, they didn't budge. Eventually, they grudgingly gave back half of the deposit. I still can't believe a place can make money from someone's loss.
My husband's cousin is marrying this total nightmare of a woman who none of us are crazy about. She's controlling and socially awkward to the max. Plus, she decided to put their wedding on Black Friday. This means that we have to spend Thanksgiving at a rehearsal dinner, and I don't get to see my elderly parents. Needless to say, I'm super annoyed. But then they took it to the next level. They scheduled another wedding event for Wednesday at the last minute. No one could make it, and now the drama queen bride is playing the victim. And the rehearsal isn't the only problem. She demanded that the groom fire his best man. The best man's wife and the bride had a long-standing feud and the bride cut her out completely. And, as it just so happens, the best man's wife is a wedding planner, who they hired and then fired. The bride also threw a hissy fit cause the groom wanted his own bachelor party. If this is the drama that goes down before the wedding, I can only imagine what will happen the day of.
About a year ago, my then girlfriend's boss was getting married. After the wedding, they flew to Bali for the honeymoon. I was at home hanging out with my girlfriend when I saw a notification flash on her phone. I picked it up and learned the devastating truth. He was sending her racy pics from the bathroom at the resort. When I saw them, I confronted her. She confessed that he'd been having an affair, and she let him know that I was onto them. He totally freaked out. From what I gathered, he stepped out of the bathroom, told his newlywed wife, "I think we messed up. We shouldn't have tied the knot," hops on a plane, and heads home. He left her stranded, on their honeymoon, without any clue of what had happened. In the end, I had to find a way to contact her and tell her the truth because he lacked the guts to do so. Their wedded bliss probably lasted a grand total of 3 days, and the 3 years I spent in that relationship was flushed down the toilet.
My fiancé Aaron and I are almost ready to tie the knot. But let me tell you, the whole planning journey hasn't exactly been smooth sailing. Aaron's mother, for a start, wouldn't stop objecting to all our plans. She's acting like she's the one getting married. But when we started talking about wedding photos, things got out of hand. Somehow my scar, a souvenir from my younger years, started getting discussed. Aaron throws out the idea to just Photoshop it out. I thought he was joking, but nope, he was totally serious. I was speechless, to be honest. He was quick to defend it, saying that's the whole point of Photoshop, to make the pictures flawless. I couldn't help but ask him, "Do you think my scar is a flaw?" He was quick to say no, but then the twisted truth came out. Yeah, it was all his mother's idea. Just like that, we're at each other's throats. He's accusing me of overreacting, saying that it's not about the scar, it's about the bigger picture. I then got into a fight with my soon-to-be mother-in-law. It seems like I'm the odd one out here, as all the women in the family appear to be on her side, and Aaron keeps going on about this being a common practice. I told him, fine, but that's not me. I have no issue with my scar and I don't want to change it, not for the wedding or anything else. You would think they'd drop it, but instead they're suggesting therapy for some past trauma that they imagine I have. Poor Aaron just looks worried. He insists that he loves me just the same.
So, me and my girlfriend are tying the knot this November, right before we head off to a new country for my job. We're super excited about beginning this fresh chapter and share the news with our families, who were also pretty stoked. Well, except for one person, my dad. I told him about our wedding plans, and his reply was a sucker punch. He was like, "November. Nope, doesn't work for me. You'll need to change your dates. That's hunting season and there's no way I'm missing it. I don't want to commit and then bail because I'm off hunting." I thought he was joking at first, so I brushed it off with a casual, "All right, I'll let you know the date and you let me know if you can make it." When I talked to my mother, she made me realize he was completely serious. I can't wrap my head around my dad choosing a hunting trip over his first kid's wedding. It really got to me that I didn't give him a piece of my mind or even uninvite him. He's acted like this before, but this time, it really hurt.
My mother-in-law's a sweetheart, but when a wedding's on the horizon, she can't help but go over the top. She has 6 kids, and at each of their weddings, she pulled some kind of stunt. For example, she's tried to show up in cream dresses at all of the weddings. At her eldest son's wedding, she tried to don a full-length white fishtail gown with gold sequins and rhinestones that left the bride in tears. After that first wedding dress disaster, her other son's brides tried to exclude her from the planning stages. Lots of effort went into keeping her in the dark so she wouldn't meddle in the arrangements. But she wouldn't be stopped. She even arrived at a wedding with a mountain of home-cooked desserts and appetizers, despite the event being fully catered. Her food, not refrigerated properly, went bad, but still ended up taking the prime spot on the dessert table, so people got sick. She also meddled in the floral arrangements for one ceremony while the couple was abroad. She even scheduled a ridiculously expensive vendor friend at the reception as a favor. The couple was livid when they discovered they'd been scammed. She disregarded her kids' wishes and threw enormous parties for visiting family before and after the weddings. For another ceremony, she promised to provide the decorations. She had yet another surprise up her sleeve. They were thrift store decorations that looked like junk, and she had been storing them on her porch. They were filled with cobwebs and dust. This ended up being the last straw for the couple, who put off their wedding plans for a whole year. Because of her antics, she's never been invited to go wedding dress shopping with her daughters-in-law, which she complains about, and says she has no idea why she's being excluded. She's a real piece of work.
My brother is about to get married and I'm one of the groomsmen. My trouble started when my wife took our 3-year-old out to a friend's one day. When they came back, I was stunned. The friend had given our daughter a white dress to wear to the wedding. I was unsure at first. I thought white was usually reserved for the bride and flower girls. My wife said she didn't mind if kids wore white at our wedding, and she pulled her friends, who all took her side. Our daughter's the only kid out of like 80 guests, since she's the only grandkid in our families. There aren't any flower girls or page boys at this wedding. I wanted to be cool about it, so I asked my brother if it was okay. He said it wasn't. The bride's wearing white and that's it. I respect his answer. It's their big day, and they make the rules. I don't want any hassle. My wife's reaction was ice cold, though. She got mad at me, calling me names. She said I should have defended our daughter and kept my mouth shut. We should have just turned up with her in her white dress. And it's not all. She wants to ask the bride and groom to buy a replacement dress. The first dress was a hand-me-down. I'm totally cool with getting a new dress and footing the bill, but it looks like my wife won't back down because it's about principle now.
I got married in 2021. I asked my best friend of 5 years to be my maid of honor, and she said yes. I let her know about my engagement party date a month earlier than anybody else, just to make sure that it worked for her. She said she'd be there, but then, out of nowhere, changed her answer to maybe just 2 days before the party. I texted her to see if she was okay or if she'd gotten sick. She said she's cool, but was still nervous about crowds. I totally understood and suggested we catch up for coffee instead. She says that she has a busy schedule and she won't commit to a date. I said that's fine, we'll figure it out later. A day later, I opened Instagram, and what I saw left me shocked. There were pictures of her at this foodie event which was indoors with over 40 people. It felt like an insult, so I decided we need to clear the air. I asked her if we're good. Yeah, just busy, she said. I told her I felt like she was avoiding me, and I mentioned that I saw her tagged at restaurants after my event. I was honest with her. I said that it really stung that she lied about being scared. Her response made my blood boil. She told me that her presence on social media is her job. She said that the tags and content are not real time, it's all planned and promoted. Then comes the whopper. She tells me she can't always be at my beck and call and shouldn't have to keep me in the loop for everything. She's got her day job and her content creation gig and networking to think about. Then she said the most obnoxious thing I've ever heard. She told me that she finds it hard to find time for non-content creators. I said thanks for explaining, and she blocked me.
My sister got married a few years ago. We're not super close, but I love her. And her husband is awesome. When they got engaged, I was so genuinely excited for them both. During the wedding, the priest asked if there were any objections. I don't know what came over me, but I made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought it would be really funny to stand up and say I object, because these two are too darn cute together. Boy, did that backfire. I thought we'd all joke about it afterward, but instead, the blood drained from my sister's face as she stared at me. No one laughed. She tried to shrug it off, but it was clear that she was furious. I awkwardly sat back down and things moved on. At the reception, I congratulated her and she went ballistic. She said that my joke wasn't funny and that it spoiled her big day. I was stunned. It was just a lighthearted joke. I wasn't actually objecting. I tried to argue my side, but that just made things worse, and my nightmare wasn't over yet. The next morning, my phone blew up with all these messages from my family saying I'd messed up. I think it got blown out of proportion. It was just a joke.
I'm getting married this winter, but since my engagement, my life has been a real-life soap opera. My dad found out that my brother has been embezzling from the family business, so my dad cut him off. I asked if I could still invite my brother to the wedding, but my dad said no. My brother was furious, but I think they need to work it out among themselves. And that's just the start. Recently, my parents split up. Mom's being a bit much and keeps telling me that she hopes that this is my first and last wedding. That's not even the worst part. Misery loves company, and now she's saying that I should just dump my fiancé and be single with her. She sent me about 15 voicemails on the subject. I don't know why she's not relying on my sister, who also happens to be newly divorced. Speaking of being miserable, my sister insists that she won't show up to the wedding because she thinks we're being insensitive getting married when she's trying to rebuild her life. Basically, my family has been stirring up most of the drama since our engagement, and the chaos keeps ramping up. At lunch with my in-laws, Mom blew up, calling my future mother-in-law names and making her feel uncomfortable. My brother made things worse by stealing a couple of Dad's business clients. This just made my dad come down heavier on him. And to top it all, my sister has gone one step further. She's trying to make one of my wedding suppliers pick a side between us and her. This makes me want to say, forget it, let's just elope. We're only supposed to have 20 people there, but this wedding's turning into an expensive nightmare.
I was raised in a posh neighborhood where people were really competitive. Despite the atmosphere, I had a great friendship with a girl named Betty who lived in one of the simpler houses. Her parents, Kathy and Ken, were down to earth. Kathy was a nurse and Ken was a mechanic. Her family was laid back and frugal, yet so many of our neighbors judged them. Everyone in the neighborhood competed to hire the most expensive contractors to work on their homes, while Kathy and Ken fixed everything up themselves. Anyway, a few years ago, Betty got engaged to Bob, another guy from the neighborhood. Though I didn't know Bob growing up, he turned out to be a pretty cool guy, which was a surprise since his family was all about keeping up with the Joneses. Bob's mother Veronica was wannabe neighborhood royalty. Even my own mom, who was into that stuff, thought Veronica was over the top. Betty and Bob wanted a chill, low-budget wedding, but Veronica insisted on a big one. She and Bob's dad Vernon planned to pay for it. That's when things spun wildly out of control. Betty and Bob agreed, but Veronica refused to let Betty's parents chip in. The only things they let them help with were the wedding invites and the travel plans. Veronica doubted their abilities, hoping the cars they'd arrange would be decent. Veronica went all out with wedding planning. It had to be perfect. The venue was fancy, the food was a sit-down affair, the decorations were over the top, and even the pool was turned into a dance floor. Throughout it all, Veronica snobbishly noted that Ken and Kathy weren't adding to the cash pool, but she did it in a very passive-aggressive way. I heard these subtle comments on multiple occasions, as I was Betty's support system through the wedding planning. Then, the wedding day came, and that's when all the tension really came to a head. Despite Veronica's interference, the photos turned out awesome. The ceremony went smoothly too. Then, the cars rolled in for the bridal party, all classic convertibles in mint condition. Everyone was impressed. We learned 3 of the cars were Ken's, which left Veronica shocked. At the reception, Veronica met some affluent family from Betty's side, which made her uncomfortable. Eventually, she crossed paths in words with Betty's brother Carl. Tipsy and still salty about losing face, she starts ranting to Carl about how Ken and Kathy should have contributed more. Carl had a response that immediately put Veronica in her place. He simply said they probably felt the house was enough. It turns out that Ken and Kathy gave Betty and Bob a house worth easily $750,000. They didn't see a point in wasting money on a big wedding, especially when the couple didn't even want one in the first place. Needless to say, word about the gift spread quickly. Veronica spent the rest of the evening forcing a smile, clearly irritated. She still gets that look when the wedding is brought up.
My husband and I got married last week. I've been real cool throughout the wedding prep and the big day itself. I mean, stuff goes wrong, but it's no big deal, right? But there was one thing I did not want to happen. No cake in the face. I kind of sensed that he might want to do the cake thing for laughs, so I told him straight up, don't do it. It just isn't funny. Plus, it would wreck my makeup and get cake on my pricey wedding dress. I made it clear I'd be majorly ticked off if he did it. He said he wouldn't. Guess what he did when we cut the cake? Yup, he smashed that cake all over my face. There was cake on my dress and my makeup was ruined, just like I predicted. It's likely that his buddies egged him on, but that's no excuse. I kept my cool, fixed myself up, and showed a happy face for the rest of the party. But later that night, I let him have it. I told him off for doing the one thing I asked him not to. He called me overdramatic, said it was no big deal and we should just enjoy being newlyweds. So, was I overreacting?